Introverts, what's the furthest you've gone to avoid people? I moved to Japan because you don't have to make small talk with strangers ever. If someone is browsing a section of a shelf at a grocery where I need something from, I pretend to look at other stuff until they go away. I swear though, today I think I was waiting for someone to leave the canned soup section while they were waiting for me to leave the salsa section diagonally behind them. The Ole Mexican food standoff. My grandfather has died like 15 times to get me out of social engagements. What a champ. I did the same thing when I was 17 with my grandma being sick. She died 10 years beforehand. Changed positions at work to a position where I make less money overall to avoid talking to guests. I just took a new job where I basically interact with dogs all day instead of people. It is bliss. Put duct tape around the top and bottom of my dorm room door and taped over the peephole so no one could tell if my lights were on from inside the dorm. I was having a bad day with being an introvert. So I used one of those grocery delivery services and texted the driver saying wasn't home at the moment and to just leave the stuff on the porch. When I heard her drive up, I literally stood in my hallway where I couldn't be seen from any windows and listened carefully. I heard her come up to the door. Knock. Knock again. Drop the bags and drive off. She sent a text that she had dropped the stuff off and I should hurry because some of it is perishable. I opened the door and got my groceries. That might be one of the lowest moments in my life. I still get pangs of shame whenever I think of it. My roommates decided to have a random study party. With like 20 people in our apartment that is only 800 square feet. Because of the unexpected intrusion, I got into the router settings and throttled the internet to dial-up era speeds. When my roommates were trying to figure out what was happening, I told them we simply had too many people splitting the bandwidth, and in annoyance they all left for the library. Best 8 hours of silence ever. I've scaled wet, steep and slippery rocks when hiking just to avoid small talk with the people on the actual path. I laughed way too hard picturing this. The worst part is, the last time I did this and was finally reaching the top of the mountain I was on, I stumbled directly into the people I was trying to avoid while they were pants down peeing on the only rock I could safely climb to because they didn't think anyone would be off the trail. My roommate is very talkative. She'll talk at me for hours on end if I let her. Sometimes when I'm not in the mood for it, I'll hop in the car and drive until she goes to bed lol. My old roommate was talkative and would fill empty air with endless chatter just to continue a conversation no one else was clearly interested in and actively not contributing to. He also talked only either about anime or inflate his own ego. I started wearing headphones with music loud enough for people around to hear just so he physically could not speak with me. I would just chill in the bathroom during lunch all throughout like 8th grade. I was driving up to the store. Saw someone I knew walk in. I didn't even stop. I just kept driving to another store. I didn't want to do small talk with them. And I knew it'd be a lot of small talk because something new just happened in their life that they'd bring up and want to talk about. I've dumped my half-full basket on the floor and left for another store after seeing people I knew. It's one thing going through the initial small talk, but to keep bumping into them every aisle, that's too ducking much. I wish people would stop confusing introversion with social anxiety. Being perfectly content while alone is introversion. Avoiding people is social anxiety. Too bad. To prove them wrong, I have both. I volunteered for a position in another country where I don't speak the language so I could avoid conversations with my co-workers. Underrated. I have been driving a mile to other gas stations for about a year now to avoid going to the 7-11, 3 minutes away from my house walking distance because I don't want to make small talk with the cashier who works there. Haha, I used to call into a 7/11 on the way to work and buy a meat pie every morning. I stopped going once the cashier got to know me because I don't want to talk to him. I sat in my car for a half hour in 90-something degree weather because I was too nervous to spend lunch in the work break room or sitting in a fast food joint. My car didn't have air conditioning. Edit. Yes. I do have social anxiety. And that is not the same as introversion. Thanks for the correction. I am unfortunately both an introvert and socially anxious. So not only do I prefer to be alone the majority of my time, I'm also nervous around people. I dropped a class because a guy asked me out. Did this, but reversed gender roles and my entire education for that year. She didn't even continue with the course, but totally ruined my friendship group who pandered to her as she was one of 2 girls out of 40 people. Edit. To clarify, she was a girl. I was a boy. Can I make it any more obvious? I was invited to low-key dinner thing at the local Chili's with a group of people I tangentially knew. Like 20-ish people I guess. Ended up sitting at a booth by myself across the way from the main table because I didn't know anyone enough to really put up the effort in to sit next to them. That, and searing social anxiety. So I ended up being the odd man out, very self-fulfilling in retrospect. I ordered an iced tea. Got super anxious and self-hating about the situation and worked myself up pretty good. Had a bit of an agoraphobic world closing in on me moment. Made the split-second and irreversible decision to bail out and I left the only bill I had in my wallet on the table because I didn't want to have to wait another ducking second for the waitress to show up and pay for my $1.50 drink. Typical depression anxiety stuff that sounds absolutely bonkers when verbalized but is very real when you're living in a basement. Working 60 hours a week at a job you despise with no hope of upward mobility. Along with a healthy amount of generalized self-sabotage to keep the cycle going. I've come a long way with that sort of thing. Still very much an introvert, but now it's a choice Marizo than a self-inflicted curse. Edit. Just to be clear, it was my prized $101 bill, which is why this whole episode was so bothersome. I ate only a box of Nutri-Grain bars in my dorm room over the course of a week because I was too uncomfortable to go to the cafeteria when I first went to college. Some painters were in our apartment and my mom and brother were moving things around. I went inside the restroom because all I can think of is how do I avoid them. Man, it's always awkward having strangers in your home to fix things. Like, do I avoid them completely and let them do their jobs, or do I keep an eye on them so nothing gets stolen? 8th grade I continued to go to detention for weeks rather than turn in a school project. It kept me from having to wander the hallways alone at lunch. In school suspension. An entire day reading in a silent, air-conditioned room. No talking. No interruptions. Even lunch was brought in and served silently. It was heaven. At my favorite local cafe the barista greeted me by name and remembered my order. I stopped going there. When I walk in the hallways alone before school, I would turn down a different hall if I saw a teacher coming towards me. It's not because I don't like them. I'm awkward when I'm only saying hello in passing. And the walk towards someone in a long hallway is incredibly awkward. My mind is racing, thinking about when is the best time to acknowledge seeing someone coming toward you, and do you smile, make eye contact, say hello? And I usually remember something I need in the other direction. But I don't want to just turn around and make the other person feel like I'm avoiding them, but if you pass them, then you can't turn around and look like you're following them now. Go. I'm tense just typing this. As an introvert I sometimes kinda just stop communicating and thinking for a few days. My wife understands, so she just tells me hello every time she sees me with a kiss. She just reads in the same room in case I need her. Social wise, I locked my keys inside once when I was way younger to avoid going somewhere. I'm currently staying at an Airbnb 15 minutes from my apartment. Go on. One of my 2 apartment mates doesn't have a concept of alone time or social cues to go away. I've had her stand in the doorway of my room and talk at me for 3 hours. Whether I respond or not. This situation is a common occurrence. Hide in my room for house and only left once the other people had left. Gone to the grocery store at 1 AM so that I didn't have to talk to anyone. Now these are me in extreme states. Although I'm introverted, I'm also pretty social. Sometimes I just go through phases where I just want to hide from the world. I went down the elevator with a colleague. We use the same subway line to get home. And I knew if we walked down together we'd also have to sit on the train together and make small talk for the next 45 minutes. So at the building exit I said I had an errand to run. Walked the opposite direction. And used a different subway line that added another 20 minutes to my commute. Worth it. I've left parties, hangouts where drugs or alcohol are involved. I mention it because it plays a key role in my excuse, and just say I went home to pass out or throw up. Really, I just wanted to go spend alone time on the internet or playing League. I like seeing people, but I can't socialize with a big group for hours on end. Exhausted after 30 minutes or so. This isn't that much of a story of how I went to great lengths to avoid someone. I went in. Got too scared to talk to the person at reception. Then walked the whole 2 miles back home. My sophomore lockers in high school were down a set of stairs, which were pretty awful and a general death zone. I had gone down to get something from my locker. And when I went back, I heard voices and I paused. I turned the other way and walked up the massive, steep hill on the side of the school to avoid anyone seeing me. It was winter and snowing too. So I was supposed to go to a female friend's house for the first time, who's actually very close to me, but since my parents are very conservative I told them I'm going for a movie with my friends and the tickets are already booked so they can't say no. Next day when I'm supposed to go, I get super anxious thinking it'd be awkward. Cancel on her. But still had to go out because of the movie. Now I'm out with no one to go to or nowhere to go with very minimal cash for around 4 hours. That day sucked. A couple friends and I were in a taiko drumming club at school. I did it because I like music and was sick of dealing with people. It was just my friends and I, so it was fun. Ended up traveling around performing. Even did a performance at the Royal Albert Hall in London. I spoke to maybe 7 different people the entire time. I remember one time, we had a door salesman at our front door. Me and my wife hid underneath the window. We laid down on the floor. The man looked inside and saw us hiding there. He slowly walked away. I developed a legitimate phobia of the telephone when I was a kid. I think it's because I was always trying to phone around trying to find my parents. Either I wouldn't find them and I'd have bad anxiety because I was hungry and alone, or I'd find them and they would tell me to duck off and leave them alone. Later on when I was about 13 my dad casually told me my mom had taken off, but he told me over the phone. Eventually I was afraid to answer the phone at all. Anytime the phone rang my heart would just drop out of my stomach. Still to this day I don't answer the phone if someone is calling. I'll either wait for them to text, or wait for them to leave a message to see what they want. Scarred for life. I recently went on holiday to Bali, and quite a few people I knew were going over at the same time, staying not far from me. The usual promises of we'll catch up when we get over there. I knew that catching up with them would involve drinking silly amounts of alcohol and just talking shit. So I faked that I had gone to another region of the island instead on a whim. And just had to be careful if I ventured out that I didn't go to places they were likely to be. At one point in my early 20s I had earphones permanently stuck in my ears so I could ignore people when they would say hello to me at work. I do that and it works 90% of the time until you get guys hitting on you who won't take a hint. I came home from work one day last week to find my modem had stopped working. No cable. No Netflix. No video games. No working from my home office. And it was raining, so no yard work. I sat on my couch for long enough to drink a beer and then got up and went to bed. I wasn't about to deal with my life in those circumstances. Not me, but my running partner confessed last night he found a book club online through Craigslist that was reading a book about the unsung power of introverts. He was interested but couldn't bring himself to go to meetings, so he just bought it and is reading it on his own.